Imagine, just for a second, that you're trapped in a massive 300-kilometer underground maze. It's pitch black, your flashlight just died, and of course, your cell phone has absolutely zero signal. You are completely, utterly isolated from the world above. Now, imagine hearing the faint sound of footsteps coming up right behind you. But you know you can't turn around because you aren't in just any maze. You're standing in a graveyard, holding the remains of over 6 million people. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to dive deep into what is widely considered the most haunted and frankly terrifying place on Earth.
Let's jump right into Section 1, The Empire of Death, a literal city beneath the city. To really understand this fascinating and chilling place, we're going to stick strictly to concrete history, documented records, and some deeply rooted local legends. Because you see, the reality of Paris is a story of incredible duality. Up above ground, it's this vibrant city, full of lights, bustling life, and beautiful, iconic architecture. But directly beneath those very same streets, there's a sprawling 300-kilometer labyrinth of absolute darkness. It's carved right out of the earth and holds millions of skeletal remains. Literally, Paris is just as massive below ground as it is up above.
Now, to truly grasp the gravity of this place, you really only need to know one number: 6 million. Over 6 million people are entombed in this underground maze. I mean, think about that scale for a second. That's practically the population of a small country, all stacked neatly in the dark. That staggering volume of history and human remains is exactly what makes the Paris catacombs the world's most haunting graveyard.
But here's where it gets truly unsettling. Out of that massive 300-kilometer network, only a tiny fraction, just 0.5%, is actually accessible to the public. The other 99.5%, it's highly restricted, practically unexplored, and strictly forbidden by the government. And you know what the most chilling part is? Every terrifying story, every local legend, and every documented scare we have comes from that tiny 0.5% sliver. It honestly makes you wonder. We can barely even begin to comprehend what's hiding in the dark of that remaining 99.5%.
Which brings us to Section 2, Trapped in the Dark. Let's look at some of the modern legends.
As you can imagine, the lure of that forbidden 99.5% is just way too strong for some people to resist. Take this incredibly chilling, heavily reported incident from 2017. 2 teenage boys decided to stay in the catacombs after hours. They actually hid until all the tourists left and the heavy doors were locked from the outside. So, searching for a way out, or maybe just a way deeper in, they stumbled upon this ominous warning sign carved right into the stone. It read, "Stop, this is the Empire of Death." But well, they were already locked in until morning. And as they walked deeper, they reported feeling this sudden suffocation. It was as if some inexplicable force was physically pulling them further into the maze. Every single time they tried to turn back, they found themselves completely hopelessly disoriented.
And as they descended into what I can only imagine was absolute terror, they heard the distinct sound of digging. Thinking it was someone coming to rescue them, they ran toward the noise, only to claim that they saw a phantom gravedigger in tattered clothes. According to the boys, this figure just looked at them and said, "You are dead too. Should I dig your grave as well?" Obviously, they ran in a blind panic. It actually took 3 full days before police sniffer dogs finally tracked them down and pulled them out of the dark. They survived, sure, but they emerged with essentially zero memory of how they managed to stay alive in that abyss.
So it begs the question, what exactly pulls people into the darkness? The boys felt like they were being dragged in, and they definitely aren't the only ones.
To understand this strange phenomenon, we need to pivot to an older but equally unsettling record from 1990. This involved an explorer who ventured into the void armed with just a camcorder. He wandered deep into the restricted tunnels, documenting the bones as he went. But the footage that was recovered later shows things taking a very rapid, terrifying turn. Suddenly, you hear the man begin hyperventilating in sheer panic. His walking turns into this desperate, frantic sprint. He drops his camera onto the damp cave floor and just runs off into the total void. That man, he vanished forever, never found. The only thing he left behind was this footage, which happened to capture a strange, mysterious painting on the cave walls right before the tape finally ended.
All right, moving on to Section 3, The Ghost of 1793, The Tale of Philibert Aspert.
To get to the bottom of this phenomenon, we actually have to travel back in time to the French Revolution, to a heavily documented historical legend. Philibert Aspert was a security guard at a local hospital during the war. His final known steps began when he simply descended the hospital stairs to fetch a drink from the wine cellar. But before he could even take a sip, he heard his name called out. Turning around, local legend says he saw his own doppelganger, a ghostly double of himself. Chasing this figure, he wandered blindly away from the cellar and directly into the uncharted bone labyrinth. There, he was swallowed completely by the darkness, totally losing his sense of direction.
And here's the tragic part. It took exactly 11 years, 11 full years, before Philibert's body was finally discovered in those pitch-black tunnels. Just imagine lying in the dark for over a decade before anyone even stumbles upon your remains. But you want to know the most chilling irony of his discovery? When they finally found his body, he wasn't deep in the maze at all. He was found mere steps from the exit stairs. He had somehow, against all odds, found his way back, but his life ended right as he was on the very verge of escape. And get this, in his hand, he was still tightly grasping that full, untouched bottle of wine from the cellar. Today, his story is used as a grim warning to anyone who thinks treating the catacombs like a playground is a good idea. Now let's dive into Section 4, The Secret Underground Cinema, The Unknown Inhabitants. We're going to shift our focus now from paranormal legends to a very different and, frankly, much more real kind of terror. The deeply unsettling reality that living, unknown people are operating right now in that restricted zone. Back in 2004, French police were on a rare patrol deep inside the caverns. Now, they were expecting empty, silent tunnels. Instead, they discovered a fully functioning underground cinema. I'm not kidding. They found 20 chairs lined up, an active CCTV recorder monitoring the tunnels, a working projector, and even various bottles of alcohol. It completely, utterly shattered the assumption that the deep catacombs are just some empty, forgotten graveyard. But the ultimate twist happened just a few days later. The police returned to that exact same spot with a larger team, ready to properly investigate this weird subterranean theater. But when they got there, everything was gone. The chairs, the projector, the cameras vanished without a single trace. The only thing left in the entire cavern was a single piece of paper lying on the floor with a very cryptic warning written on it. It just said, "Don't search." To this day, nobody has any idea who built it, who moved it, or who is secretly living down there in the dark.
That brings us to our final part. Section 5, Why do catacombs exist? Unearthing the origins.
We've talked a lot about the horrors and the mysteries, but we really need to pull back the curtain and answer the fundamental question driving this whole explainer. Why was this massive, underground empire of bones created in the first place? Well, if we trace the grim historical timeline, it all started about 1,000 years ago, when deep limestone quarries were dug under Paris just to harvest stone for building the city above. Fast forward to the 1700s, and Paris was experiencing a massive population boom. Cemeteries were rapidly overflowing, and then a devastating plague struck. People were dying so fast that older corpses were literally being dug up just to make room for the fresh dead in the graveyards. It was an absolute public health catastrophe. Desperate, the government remembered those abandoned 1,000-year-old quarries below the city and decided on a drastic solution. For the next 12 years, they worked every single night to painstakingly relocate 6 million bodies underground.
It was a grim reality driven by absolute desperation. The city was facing a horrific crisis: overflowing graves, a deadly plague, and a public health emergency that was literally tearing Paris apart. The solution? 12 grueling, exhausting years of government workers carefully moving, sorting, and meticulously stacking the bones of 6 million citizens into those abandoned mining shafts. They essentially took a massive catastrophe and built the labyrinth of death that we see today.
So let's wrap this up. We've seen the sheer scale of those 6 million bodies. We've gone over the terrifying encounters of those who wander off that tiny 0.5% mapped path, and the undeniable proof that unknown people are actively operating in the dark below one of the world's brightest cities. The Paris catacombs are this incredible testament to history, but also a literal breeding ground for chilling mysteries. I want to leave you with a final thought to take away from all of this today. If a 300-kilometer labyrinth holding millions of skeletons can exist directly beneath the bustling, modern streets of Paris, largely unexplored and shrouded in mystery, what else do you think is hiding in the dark, unexplored corners of our world?